There, it hurts, the Apache woman moaned. The rancher stopped, and then did the unthinkable. The sun had just started its slow climb over the dusty hills when the rancher saddled his horse and stepped out onto the uneven trail that led across his land. The morning air was cool and smelled faintly of dry grass and earth, the kind of smell that made him feel both awake and alert. His ranch, spread over many acres of rough terrain, was a place of solitude, a refuge from the noise of the small town not far away. Most days he worked alone, tending to the cattle, repairing fences, and making sure the land stayed in the best condition he could manage. But on this particular morning, the usual quiet was about to be broken in a way he had never expected. As he rode along the ridge, his eyes scanning the open fields, he noticed movement in the distance. A figure was struggling near the edge of the creek that cut through his property. From this distance, he could see the flurry of motion, someone wrestling with a horse that seemed unusually restless. The rancher slowed his pace, squinting against the sunlight. He recognized her immediately. She was an Apache woman, strong and slender, with movements that carried a natural grace even in her struggle. She wore simple clothing, durable and suited for the work she had to do, and a scarf that shielded her hair from the morning dust. For a moment, he considered continuing on. There had been tensions in the past between the settlers and the Apache families who lived near his land. He had learned over the years that interfering in certain situations could cause trouble, even if his intentions were good. But then he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. The horse had stumbled. One of its front legs caught on a hidden rock, and the woman was thrown off balance. She cried out, a sharp, fearful sound that carried across the quiet fields. "There, it hurts," she moaned, her voice breaking slightly, and the rancher's heart sank. There was fear in her tone, but also a hint of determination. He could see that she was trying to regain control of the horse, to lift it off her, but her strength alone was not enough. Without thinking twice, he nudged his horse forward, galloping toward her. The sound of hooves pounding against the hard earth echoed in the morning air. When he reached them, he saw the horse had partially fallen on her ankle, pinning her against the ground. She winced, biting her lip to keep from crying out again. The rancher acted quickly, sliding from his horse and gripping the horse's reins. With careful, steady effort, he lifted the animal just enough for her to pull herself free. She sat back on the dry ground, breathing heavily, rubbing her ankle. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but urgent, careful not to startle her further. The woman looked at him warily, her dark eyes flashing with a mixture of pain, surprise, and caution. For a moment, she said nothing, just assessed him, as though deciding whether he could be trusted. The rancher understood. He had seen that look before, a glance that measured not just a person's face, but their intentions. Finally, she nodded, though her ankle still throbbed painfully. "I think so," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's my ankle hurt, but it will be okay." He frowned slightly. He had seen enough injuries from his work on the ranch to know when someone was downplaying pain. He knelt beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Let me take a look," he said gently. "I can help make it better." She hesitated, shifting slightly, but the discomfort in her movements betrayed the truth. She needed help. Slowly, she extended her foot, and he examined it carefully. The ankle was swollen, and a small cut on her leg had begun to bleed, though it was minor. He reached for a clean cloth from his pack and wrapped it around the cut, speaking quietly all the while. "You're lucky it's not worse," he said. "A bad sprain can take weeks to heal if you don't rest it." The woman's lips pressed together, and she nodded again, finally allowing him to continue. There was a quiet strength in her, even in this vulnerable moment. She was used to hard work, to relying on herself, and yet here she was, accepting help from someone she barely knew. The rancher felt a surge of respect for her courage. He helped her to her feet, supporting her as she tested her weight on the injured ankle. She stumbled slightly, and he caught her, steadying her with firm, careful hands. She looked at him, almost in disbelief, and then allowed a small smile to cross her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "No need to thank me yet," he replied with a hint of a smile. "We need to get you somewhere safe where you can rest it properly." They moved slowly, the rancher offering steady support as they made their way toward his barn. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air, and the quiet landscape seemed to hum with life. Birds calling from nearby trees, the distant lowing of cattle, and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the dirt path. Despite the pain and the unusual circumstances, there was a sense of calm in the moment. Both were aware of the cautious boundaries they were crossing, but necessity and human decency had a way of bridging gaps that fear and tradition often could not. Once inside the barn, he helped her to a clean pile of hay. The smell of straw mixed with leather and the faint tang of horses surrounded them. She settled down slowly, wincing as she adjusted her position. He knelt beside her again, speaking in a calm, measured tone. "I'm going to make a simple splint for your ankle. It will help until you can get proper care." She watched him silently, still cautious, but beginning to trust his hands and his intentions. The rancher worked carefully, fashioning a splint from a piece of wood and cloth he kept for emergencies. Every movement was deliberate, and he explained what he was doing as he worked. "This will keep your ankle from moving too much. It's not perfect, but it will help reduce the pain and prevent further injury." Her eyes softened slightly. I did not expect this," she admitted, her voice low. "I thought you might just leave me." He shook his head gently. "No, I couldn't do that. Anyone in pain deserves help." For a moment, there was silence, only broken by the sounds of the barn and the occasional movement of horses in their stalls. The woman's breathing slowed as she adjusted to the splint. She looked at the rancher with something approaching respect, though her pride still lingered, making her hesitant to speak freely. "You're kind," she said after a while. "Most people would not." Her words trailed off. The rancher smiled faintly. "Kindness doesn't cost much," he said. "It just takes courage." The afternoon passed slowly. He fetched water for her, offered her some bread he had packed for himself, and kept a watchful eye on her injuries. She accepted the food reluctantly, still unsure of him but recognizing that he meant no harm. In those quiet hours, a subtle bond began to form, not one of friendship yet, not completely, but of mutual respect and understanding. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the woman could move her foot with less pain, though she still needed to rest. The rancher made a soft bed of straw in a corner of the barn, ensuring she would be comfortable. "Try to keep off it as much as possible," he advised. "Rest is important." She nodded, grateful but not accustomed to showing too much gratitude. "I will," she said quietly. "Thank you for stopping." The rancher stood, brushing off his hands. "Sometimes doing the right thing means taking a small risk," he said simply. "I hope that today it was worth it." She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, her dark eyes thoughtful. There was an understanding between them that words could not fully capture, the recognition that moments of crisis could reveal character in ways ordinary days never would. As he prepared to leave the barn to tend to his work outside, he glanced back at her. She was sitting quietly, examining the makeshift splint, and for the first time since the accident, a small sense of relief seemed to settle over her. The rancher knew this was only the beginning. The day had started like any other, with routine work and solitude, but it had turned into something entirely unexpected. A chance encounter that challenged boundaries, tested courage, and hinted at the possibility of trust and human connection where neither had been expected. He mounted his horse and rode to the edge of the field, looking back once more at the barn. She waved slightly, and he nodded. The trail ahead was long, and the day was far from over, but in that quiet moment, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't anticipated. The world could be harsh, yes, but small acts of compassion had the power to change it, even if only for a single person. And in the barn, the woman sat quietly, her ankle throbbing but her heart a little lighter. She did not know what the rest of the day would bring, or how her life might be changed by this unexpected encounter, but one thing was clear: help, kindness, and courage could come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes that was enough to turn pain into hope. The morning had passed, and the sun had climbed high into the sky, casting a warm glow over the ranch. The air was still, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant lowing of cattle. The Apache woman sat quietly on the hay in the barn, her ankle carefully supported by the makeshift splint. Every so often, she flexed her foot gently, testing for pain. It throbbed less than it had when the rancher had first lifted the horse from her, but the ache remained, a reminder of the accident. She was used to hard work, used to pushing through discomfort, yet this injury made her realize how vulnerable she truly was. The rancher had settled on a bench nearby, quietly mending a torn strap of leather from his saddlebags. He spoke little, but his presence was steady and calming. There was something in the way he worked that made her feel safe, though she would never have admitted it aloud. His hands were careful, precise, and every so often he glanced toward her with a faint smile, as if to check she was okay without disturbing her. After a long pause, the woman spoke, her voice low and cautious. You did not have to stop," she said. "I could have managed." "I always manage." He looked up, meeting her gaze, and shook his head gently. "Sometimes we need help. No matter how strong we are, no one can do everything alone. I could not leave you there in pain." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not in suspicion. There was a hint of curiosity there, as if she was measuring the truth of his words. She had heard many promises in her life, some kind and some empty. But something in his tone, steady, patient, honest, made her believe him, even if just a little. "Most people," she said slowly, "would not help, especially someone like you." He raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me?" "Yes," she said, shaking her head. "A rancher, a man, you see an Apache woman and you think trouble or danger or something to ignore. You do not stop." "Most would not." He leaned back slightly, considering her words. "I suppose I could have ignored it," he admitted. "I could have kept writing and pretended I did not see, but I did see, and I could not do that. You were hurt. That was enough for me." She remained silent, studying him carefully. There was a weight in her gaze, an unspoken acknowledgement that she understood what he had done was not simple. It was rare to encounter someone willing to cross boundaries, someone who chose compassion over caution or fear. She had grown up in a world where survival often meant keeping to oneself, where trust was earned slowly and carefully. And yet, here was a man who had acted before trust had even been established. The rancher stood and walked toward the corner of the barn where a small barrel of water sat. He dipped a cup and brought it back to her. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Drink. It will help with the pain." She accepted it reluctantly, sipping slowly. The cool water was refreshing, and she felt some of the tension in her muscles ease. "Thank you," she said again, her voice quieter this time, more sincere. "You're welcome," he replied simply. "You're strong, but even the strongest need care sometimes." For the next hour, he worked quietly nearby, attending to small chores in the barn, brushing the horses, tightening straps, arranging hay. Every so often, he glanced at her, his eyes soft but attentive. She watched him as well, noticing the care in his movements, the way he treated the animals and the land with respect. There was a calmness about him, a quiet confidence that did not demand attention but naturally commanded it. As the sun climbed higher, the woman's curiosity grew. She had spent much of her life observing people, learning to judge character quickly. There were many who spoke kindly but acted differently. There were others who acted kindly but expected something in return. But this rancher, she could not yet tell, his actions were simple yet deliberate. There was no rush, no pretense, just steady care. Finally, she broke the silence again. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Why not just leave?" He paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because no one deserves to be left in pain when it can be helped. And because, sometimes, helping someone else is the only way to remind yourself who you are." She frowned slightly, considering his words. They were simple, almost obvious, yet carried weight. In her life, she had learned that actions mattered more than words. This man's actions spoke louder than anything he could have said. And somehow, those actions had a way of reaching across the barriers she had built around herself. The afternoon passed slowly, but not uncomfortably. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of the horses and the occasional breeze through the open doors. The woman rested as best she could, occasionally moving her ankle gently to keep the blood flowing. The rancher continued his work, bringing small things to make her more comfortable: a clean blanket, a piece of bread, extra water. Each gesture was simple, yet it made her feel seen and cared for in a way she had rarely experienced. At one point she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. You do not know me, you do not have to care, and yet," she trailed off, unsure how to finish. "I know," he said softly. "I do not know you, but knowing is not always required to do what is right. Sometimes action matters more than knowledge." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she allowed herself to relax slightly. She felt a strange combination of relief and curiosity, as if a door had opened that she had kept firmly closed for years. There was something in him that was trustworthy, something that did not demand obedience or gratitude, something that simply existed to help when it mattered. Hours passed, and the sun began to lower toward the horizon. The light shifted in the barn, casting long shadows across the hay and wooden beams. The woman's ankle was still tender, but the pain had eased enough that she could sit more comfortably. The rancher moved closer, offering gentle advice. "You should try to rest," he said. "Keep your foot elevated, avoid moving too much until it is stronger." She nodded, following his instructions. "I will try," she said. "It is hard to stay still." "I know," he said, smiling faintly. "But sometimes staying still is the fastest way to heal." The evening air began to cool, and the rancher prepared a small meal for the two of them. He set it on a clean surface nearby, bread, dried fruit, and some cheese he had kept in his pack. She watched him silently, still cautious, but her curiosity growing. "You eat?" he asked gently. I will," she said after a moment, reaching for a piece of bread. They ate in silence, the quiet companionship between them growing with each passing moment. There was no need for forced conversation, no pressure to speak beyond comfort. The woman had learned to read people carefully, and she could see that he was patient, respectful, and genuine. This alone was rare enough to make her cautious trust begin to take root. As night approached, the rancher made a simple bed for her on a clean pile of hay, using blankets to ensure warmth. The barn smelled faintly of hay, leather, and the earthy scent of animals, creating a sense of safety that was comforting despite the injury. "You will be safe here tonight," he said. "I will check on you before I sleep just to make sure you are comfortable." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Thank you," she said softly. I did not expect such care from someone I barely know." "Care is not always expected," he replied, "but it is always needed, and it is never wasted." For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to breathe fully, letting go of the tension she had carried. She had been hurt, vulnerable, and unsure, yet the kindness of a stranger had made her feel seen and valued. It was a strange, almost unfamiliar feeling, one she was unsure how to process, but one that gave her a sense of hope she had not realized she still carried. The rancher moved to the barn door, looking out at the darkening landscape. The stars were beginning to appear, small points of light against the vast expanse of night. He glanced back at her, who was lying quietly on the hay, her breathing steady. The day had started with routine work and solitude, yet it had transformed into something far more significant, a moment of human connection, born from necessity but deepened by compassion and understanding. He felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from pride, but from the knowledge that he had acted when it mattered most. The woman's trust was fragile but growing, and that trust was a powerful thing. It reminded him that even in a harsh, unforgiving world, simple acts of kindness could create ripples that changed lives, if only for a single moment. As the night settled over the ranch, the woman lay quietly, reflecting on the events of the day. She had been hurt, yes, but she had also experienced something she had not expected, the care of a stranger who acted with courage, patience, and respect. It was an experience that would stay with her, shaping her thoughts and feelings in ways she did not yet fully understand. And so in the quiet barn, with the stars shining faintly above and the soft sounds of animals around her, a bond began to grow. A bond built on trust, respect, and the simple, undeniable truth that kindness, even in small doses, could bridge even the widest gaps between people. The next morning broke slowly over the ranch. Sunlight spilled across the fields, turning the grass a soft golden color. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth, hay, and the faint aroma of the animals in their stalls. The rancher woke early, as was his habit, and quietly checked the barn. The Apache woman had spent the night on the straw bed he had prepared, and she was awake, sitting quietly with her ankle elevated and wrapped carefully in the splint. Her face was calm, but there was a hint of tension in her posture. Even with rest, the swelling had not completely gone down. She flexed her toes gently, wincing at the discomfort. The rancher noticed immediately. He approached slowly, speaking in his usual calm tone. "How's the ankle this morning?" he asked. She shrugged slightly, keeping her voice low. "Still sore," she admitted, "but it will be better." He knelt beside her, examining the ankle more closely. The swelling had gone down a little, but the bruising was dark and deep. He pressed lightly around the joint, careful not to cause pain, and frowned. "I think it may be more serious than we first thought," he said honestly. "I do not want you to risk making it worse." Her eyes widened slightly. "Serious?" she repeated. "Yes," he said. "You need proper care, a doctor, or at least someone who can examine it carefully and make sure it heals correctly." She bit her lip, her pride flaring. "I can manage," she said firmly. I've dealt with injuries before. I do not need outside help. He shook his head gently. This is different, he said. A sprain can heal with rest, yes, but if it is broken and we do not treat it correctly, it could cause problems for the rest of your life. I cannot let that happen. She looked at him, her dark eyes narrowing slightly. She was not used to being told what to do, especially by a stranger. Yet there was something in the way he spoke, calm, respectful, firm, without being commanding, that made her pause. She could see the concern in his eyes, the care in his hands, and she knew he meant every word. After a long moment she sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "What do you propose?" she asked quietly. The rancher looked around the barn, thinking carefully. The nearest town was hours away, and the roads were rough. Waiting for someone to come and transport her safely could take too long. If the injury was serious, time was important. He made a decision, though it was not an easy one. "I will take you," he said simply. "I will bring you to a doctor myself if you will allow it. It may be dangerous on the road, but it is the safest option I can offer." Her eyes widened in surprise. You would do that?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, I know it is unthinkable, maybe even frightening. But it is the right thing to do. You need help, and I am able to give it." She hesitated, weighing her options carefully. Her pride and independence told her to refuse, to find another way. But the pain in her ankle, the knowledge of how serious it could be, and the trust she had begun to feel in this man made her reconsider. Slowly, she nodded. "Very well," she said quietly. I will go with you." The rancher gave a faint, reassuring smile. "Good," he said. "We will go carefully. You do not need to worry." He helped her stand, supporting her weight as she tested her injured foot. Each step was cautious, slow, and careful, but she felt a strange sense of relief. She had expected the journey to be uncomfortable, even dangerous, but the presence of someone willing to protect her made the challenge seem more manageable. As they prepared to leave the barn, he gathered supplies for the journey, a small pack with water, food, and blankets, enough to make the trip safer and more comfortable. He adjusted the splint once more, ensuring it would remain secure during travel. The woman watched silently, her curiosity and apprehension mingling. She was not used to relying on others, yet here she was, trusting a man she had known for less than a day with her safety. They set off slowly, the rancher leading his horse carefully down the rough trail, the woman supporting herself with his help. Each step required attention, not just to the path but to the movement of the injured ankle. The sun was high and the heat began to press down on them, but the rancher maintained a steady pace, pausing when needed, offering water and encouragement. "You are strong," he said at one point, glancing at her. "Even with this injury, you move with determination." "It is admirable." She looked at him, surprised by the observation. "I must be," she replied quietly. "I have no choice. Life does not allow weakness." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes life also allows help," he said softly. "Accepting it is not weakness, it is strength." She said nothing immediately, but his words lingered in her mind. She was not used to such observations, careful, honest, and without expectation. It unsettled her slightly, but also made her think. Perhaps there was truth in what he said. Perhaps accepting help did not diminish her strength, but allowed her to survive and endure more than she could alone. The journey continued, each step forward a test of patience and endurance. The trail was uneven, with hidden rocks and patches of dry grass that could slip underfoot. The rancher guided her carefully, adjusting his hold when she stumbled, ensuring that every movement caused as little pain as possible. There were moments of silence between them, comfortable and quiet, broken only by the sounds of nature around them. Birds calling, the distant rustle of trees, and the occasional lowing of cattle in the fields below. At one point, the woman glanced at the rancher and spoke softly. "You are taking a great risk," she said. "Traveling with me, caring for me, it could bring trouble." He shook his head. "I am aware," he said, "but doing nothing could be worse." Sometimes the right choice is the one that brings risk. Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Her eyes softened slightly at his words. She could see the truth in them. He was not reckless, not careless, but deliberate, weighing danger against necessity and choosing what was morally right. It was a rare quality, one she had seldom seen in others. Hours passed. The sun moved slowly across the sky, casting long shadows as the afternoon approached. They paused under a large tree for shade, the rancher offering her water and resting himself briefly. She allowed herself to sit, adjusting the blankets under her ankle to reduce swelling and discomfort. The silence between them was not awkward, it was shared understanding. Both knew the journey was difficult but necessary. Both understood the unspoken bond forming, one of trust, respect, and a quiet acknowledgement of courage. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, the rancher assessed the distance left to travel. The doctor's office was still some miles away and the terrain ahead was rougher. He made a careful decision. "We must move slowly from here," he said. "One misstep could make the injury worse. I will guide you step by step until we reach the doctor." The woman nodded, grateful yet apprehensive. "I trust you," she said quietly, "though it is strange to do so quickly." He smiled faintly. "Trust is earned in moments, not always in years," he said, "and sometimes the right choice is to give it even when uncertain." They continued along the trail, moving cautiously as evening approached. Each step was deliberate, every movement mindful of the injured ankle. They passed streams, rocky patches, and fields of tall grass, each obstacle requiring careful navigation. Despite the physical challenge, there was a sense of purpose and connection growing between them. They were no longer just a rancher and a stranger. They were two people bound by circumstance, courage, and mutual respect. As darkness began to fall, the rancher led her to a safer area where he could set up a temporary resting spot. He spread blankets, checked the splint, and offered water again. "We will rest here for a short time," he said. "The final stretch is still ahead, but we can make it safely in the morning." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fatigue and gratitude. "You have risked much," she said softly. "I do not know how to repay this." He shook his head. "No repayment is needed," he said. "Your safety is enough, that is all that matters." The night settled over them, the stars slowly appearing in the vast sky above. The quiet was filled with the sounds of nature, the whispering wind, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the soft rustling of leaves. They rested in silence, the bond between them deepening through shared struggle, care, and courage. In those quiet hours, the woman reflected on the events of the day. She had been hurt, vulnerable, and uncertain, yet the actions of the rancher had shown her something remarkable. That compassion, courage, and honesty could cross boundaries and build trust in ways she had never imagined. The journey was far from over, but she felt a growing sense of hope, a quiet reassurance that she was not alone in facing what lay ahead. And for the rancher, the day had proven that doing the right thing often required risk, patience, and steady determination. He had acted when it mattered most, and in doing so had begun to form a connection that neither of them would forget. The night grew deeper, the air cooler, and they settled into a careful rest. Both understood that the next day would bring challenges, but they also knew that courage and trust had a way of carrying people further than fear alone ever could. The morning light crept slowly over the horizon, painting the ranch in soft gold and amber hues. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dew and earth. The Apache woman stirred on the blankets the rancher had carefully laid out the night before. Her ankle, while still tender, had swollen slightly less thanks to the careful support and rest. She flexed her toes cautiously, wincing but relieved that the pain had eased. The rancher, already awake and attentive, knelt beside her to inspect the ankle. "How does it feel?" he asked gently. "Better," she replied softly, "but it is still sore." He nodded, satisfied that rest and careful support were helping. "We will continue slowly today. You must allow your body to heal." She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. The day before, she had been cautious and wary, uncertain about trusting someone so quickly. But over the hours and through the careful attention he had shown, a bond had formed, one that went beyond words, built on respect, kindness, and shared humanity. The rancher helped her stand, supporting her carefully as they prepared to continue the journey. Each step was deliberate, every movement measured to avoid unnecessary pain. Despite the discomfort, she felt a strange sense of reassurance. She was not alone, and for the first time in a long while, she felt that vulnerability could be met with compassion rather than judgment or danger. As they walked, the rancher spoke quietly, not to fill the silence but to offer guidance and calm. "The next few hours will be slow," he said. "That is all right, we are not in a rush. The most important thing is your safety." She nodded, appreciating the patience he showed. You are unlike anyone I have known," she said softly. "You act with care without expecting anything in return." He smiled faintly. "That is how it should be," he said. "Kindness does not require reward, it simply exists for those who need it." Their path took them through fields dotted with wildflowers and small groves of trees. Birds called from the branches, and the distant murmur of a stream added a gentle rhythm to their steps. Despite the slow pace, the journey was not unpleasant. There was a quiet beauty in the world around them, a reminder that even hardship could be softened by attention to small wonders. The woman glanced at the rancher occasionally, noticing the careful way he navigated the uneven ground, the steady hand that offered support when she faltered. There was a quiet strength in him that did not boast or demand attention, but provided stability in a world that could be unpredictable and harsh. She had seen courage before in her family and her community, but this was different. It was a courage that combined thoughtfulness, skill, and compassion, the kind that made people feel safe and valued. By midday, they had reached a small clearing near the edge of the town where the doctor's office was located. The rancher helped her sit on a rock, offering water and resting his hands lightly on her shoulders to ensure she was steady. "We are almost there," he said. "Just a little further and you will have proper care." She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with relief. I never imagined someone would go so far for me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "It is not about imagining. It is about doing what is right when the moment comes. You deserved help and I could provide it." The woman's gaze softened, a subtle warmth touching her expression. "I trust you," she said, the words hesitant but sincere. "Not many I could say that to," he smiled faintly, a quiet satisfaction in his expression. "Trust is a gift," he said. "It should never be given lightly, but it should always be offered when it is needed most." They walked the remaining distance carefully, step by step, until the doctor's office was in sight. The woman's heart lifted slightly at the sight of the building. Though she was proud and independent, she knew that professional care was necessary. The rancher guided her inside, explaining briefly to the doctor the nature of her injury. The doctor examined her ankle with careful hands, checking for fractures and soft tissue damage. "It is a severe sprain," the doctor said finally. "If treated carefully, it will heal well, but you must rest and follow the instructions closely." The woman nodded, relieved. "Thank you," she said quietly. The rancher looked at her with a small, encouraging smile. "See," he said softly, "it was worth the journey." Over the next few days, the rancher stayed nearby, checking in on her regularly. He brought supplies, offered food, and helped her move when necessary. The Apache woman, accustomed to relying on herself, found it difficult at first to accept such care. Yet with each passing day, she felt the strength of trust grow, realizing that allowing someone to help did not diminish her independence, but rather ensured her ability to continue her work and life without permanent injury. During this time, they shared quiet conversations. The woman spoke of her life, her family, and the challenges she had faced. The rancher shared stories of the ranch, the work, and his own experiences living in solitude. Though their worlds were different, there was a surprising amount of common ground: resilience, determination, and a respect for the land and its creatures. Each conversation deepened the bond between them, a connection built on mutual respect and the shared experience of facing hardship together. One afternoon, as she rested on a bed in the small room provided by the doctor, the woman looked at the rancher and spoke quietly. I have learned something," she said. "What is that?" he asked, curious. "That courage is not always loud," she said. "Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is patient, sometimes it is kind, and sometimes it can be found in the most unexpected places." He nodded, understanding fully. "Exactly," he said. "Courage and kindness are powerful, but they require trust to flourish. You have given both today, even in a small way, and it has made a difference." The woman smiled faintly, a subtle warmth in her eyes. I never expected to meet someone like you," she admitted. "Someone who acts without expectation, without fear, simply because it is right." He shrugged gently. "We all have the capacity to do the right thing," he said. "Sometimes it takes a moment, sometimes it takes risk, but it is always possible." The days passed, and the woman's ankle healed steadily. Each small improvement brought relief and a sense of progress. The rancher's support never wavered, steady, calm, and respectful. By the time she was ready to return to her home, she had recovered enough to walk confidently with minimal assistance. As they prepared to leave the doctor's office, she turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I am grateful," she said softly. "Not just for the help, but for everything. For your patience, your care, your understanding. I will not forget it." He smiled, a quiet pride in his gaze. "You do not need to remember me for what I did," he said. "Remember it for yourself, for the strength and courage it takes to accept help when it is needed." She nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Though their paths had crossed briefly, the impact of their shared experience would linger far longer. Trust, compassion, and courage had bridged the gap between them, creating a bond that transcended background, culture, and circumstance. The journey back to her home was slower, cautious, and careful. The rancher supported her gently as she navigated the uneven paths, and though the distance was challenging, there was a sense of quiet triumph in each step. She had faced pain, vulnerability, and uncertainty, and had done so with dignity, courage, and the willingness to trust another human being. By the time they reached her home, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. She paused, looking at the rancher, her eyes reflecting gratitude and newfound respect. "Thank you," she said once more, her voice sincere and steady. He nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "You are welcome," he replied. "Take care of yourself. Rest, heal, and remember the strength you carry within." She entered her home carefully, adjusting to the support and guidance he had provided. Inside, her family welcomed her back with relief, seeing the improvement and knowing she had been cared for. Yet it was the quiet bond she had formed with the rancher that stayed with her most. The knowledge that trust, courage, and compassion could appear in the most unexpected moments, and from the most unexpected people. As the sun set over the ranch and the surrounding land, the Apache woman sat quietly, reflecting on the journey, the injury, and the care she had received. She had learned that vulnerability did not equal weakness, that allowing help was an act of strength, and that human connection, even brief and unexpected, could leave a lasting impact. For the rancher, the experience had reinforced the importance of acting with integrity, courage, and patience. Doing the right thing had required risk, focus, and empathy, but it had also created a bond of respect and understanding that neither time nor distance could easily erase. In the quiet evening, with the stars beginning to appear, both felt the unspoken truth, that compassion and courage could cross boundaries, heal pain, and leave an enduring mark on the lives of those involved. And sometimes the unthinkable choice, to act when others might hesitate, could change everything.